Hello, everybody, and welcome to the I Am 1-2 podcast with your host, Christopher Cohn, and my good friend, my good co-pilot, my producer, my buddy, my recovery friend in arms, Dan the Man is in the studio, everybody. Say hello, Dan.
Hi, everybody. Hope everybody's doing well.
I cannot think of enough exclamations to say before your name. I need to write some down. Welcome, everybody. We are glad you're here. If you're just happening on this podcast, it is a podcast on all things recovery, meaning your recovery in life from whatever in the past you would like to let go of, what you would like to work on, things that you want to improve, and we will provide you the tools and the suggestions and the recovery things we've learned from over 89 years of this beautiful gift called the 12-Step Program that's been going forward. And we have learned so much about how to live a better life on this planet. As we say, we wish the whole world had this and we would have a completely different planet. But we're working on that by trying to spread the message. So we are glad you're with us today. So we're going to get right to our topic today because I think it's a topic that every newcomer in recovery and every person who's helping somebody in early recovery should know about, which I did not know a lot about in my early recovery. I hit a treatment center in 1983. And this medical diagnosis for this phenomenon did not exist till 1979. So I don't remember hearing much about this, but it is an acronym called PAWS, P-A-W-S, Post-Acute Withdrawal Syndromes. And what it describes is that you're going to go through this early phase of your earliest recovery called acute withdrawals. You will maybe need medical attention during that period, perhaps should be in a hospital, especially if you're coming off alcohol and or benzos. If you're coming off depressants, that can kill you. Please get medical assistance. Do not detox yourself. You could die, okay? But after you finish with your acute withdrawals of sweating, shakes, nausea, feeling like crap in general, then you're going to enter into the second phase called post-acute withdrawals. And those can last up to a year and possibly up to 2 years if you are using methamphetamine. The good news, don't freak out, is that your withdrawal symptoms will become insignificant and unnoticeable past a certain point. So in other words, as you're progressing in your recovery, what you feel at 1 month is not what you will feel at 2 months in terms of intensity. And they'll get to a point where you don't even notice. You might just wake up one day and feel a little crappy and not connect that to, oh, my body is still healing. And I got to tell you, having been in the business over 22 years of helping people professionally, I have not yet met an addict who did not underestimate the damage done to themselves by their chemical. And you want to know who the worst ones are? Our good old potheads, man. They have this idea that it's safe and there's nothing wrong with it, and today's pot is a hardcore narcotic, and then they're sitting there in group talking to me about all these symptoms they're having, and they don't understand why. It's like, dude, you've done some real damage to yourself. These are chemicals that do not belong in the human system. You can tell yourself culturally that we drink alcohol in America, but your body's going to reject it because it doesn't occur biologically, naturally in your system. When you take alcohol and drugs in your system of any kind with those foreign chemicals in them, your body's going to react and say this doesn't belong here. It's like an invading poison that it needs to get rid of, okay? So particularly like THC or alcohol or any side effects from pills, all that are side chemicals from pills, all those things don't belong in the body. The modern pills are made out of petroleum products, so you can obviously tell that's not good for your health, okay, to abuse for certain. So we want to talk about this phenomenon because we want to prepare you and your loved ones for what to expect. Because if they don't get this information, they're just going to think you're batshit crazy. And you don't want that, nor do you want them thinking you've relapsed, okay? So let's focus on this for a little bit. First thing I want to touch on is this idea of what makes early recovery so damn hard, all right? So I want to address this point about why early recovery is so hard, and there's a physiological basis for this, okay? So what happens with addiction in general is that what you're going to go through first is this phase of getting the high from the actual substance itself. Your brain has natural mechanisms to make you feel good. And when they're operating in optimum conditions, you should feel generally okay when somebody says, how are you doing? My answer is, I'm okay. I'm just okay because my body's in balance, homeostatic, everything's fine. Then you're going to introduce this chemical in there and you're going to raise your dopamine and raise your endorphins, and you're going to get the actual high effect from that. Now, unfortunately, as the body feels that change happen, it's going to start to release chemicals to fight it. We'll talk about that later with the rubber band effect. But what happens over time is your body adapts and adjusts to that higher chemical. And it does so by turning down your natural abilities to feel good, particularly in the center part of your brain, what's called your dopamine D2 receptors. They are turned off because you are receiving so much dopamine, it would overwhelm your system if it let it all in. So it's going to turn off the floodgates and close those little valves there to not receive those things. When you stop using, now the body, it takes a while to catch up and understand that it doesn't have that outside chemical to make it feel better, and it takes a while for those things to turn back on and or open up those gates to receive your natural chemicals in your brain. Hence, in early recovery, if you feel like crap, if you feel bored all the time, if you have no motivation, if you feel depressed, if you've got anxiety, all that stuff is normal and will pass. Unfortunately, a vast majority of addicts and alcoholics let that overwhelm them, and they get too caught up thinking this is the way I'm going to feel forever, and then they relapse and they start the whole cycle all over again. All right? So be patient. I say about 2 weeks' time. Usually my people in my group go from feeling crappy and not really wanting to participate to suddenly they're coming in and reporting their numbers are way down and that they're okay and they slept well last night, etc. Sleep is the number one thing that gets affected most by their drug and alcohol use in early recovery. So use melatonin, things like that. We'll talk about that on a later date. But just know that it will pass, all right? And it's going to take a minute. Depending on how long you used and what you used, it's going to take a minute to get your body to kick back in and help you out, okay? All right, so why do we have these effects from the post-acute withdrawals? I'm going to go through the actual rubber band effect of why this happens, and then we're going to talk about all the different areas that you're going to represent in your behaviors in front of your family that you need to know. That doesn't mean you're doing anything wrong. It just means that you're having some post-acute withdrawals, and your family needs to know this so they don't think you're going behind their back and maybe taking a drink, because you are going to act a fool. Plan on that in early recovery. You're going to make terrible decisions. You're going to act silly, and you better get a sponsor that you can lean on to say, what's happening to me? I don't understand why I'm doing this. Just insane, crazy behaviors from newcomers because your brain is out of whack. That's all it is. And if anybody asks you what's wrong with you, just say, I don't know. I'm in early recovery. Leave me alone. And that should be enough. Any old timer will take that and say, cool, you'll get better. Keep coming back. So what happens with this thing called homeostasis? This is the thing that is developed over a millennia. That's not enough. Over hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of years of humanoids being on the earth, our brain has developed this ability that no matter how harsh the outer environment, it's going to find and seek this homeostatic state of balance as best it can. Even if it's starving, even if it's freezing, it's going to turn up and turn down whatever dials it can control within the body to help you reach a state of, I'm okay, I'm sort of okay in the balance. Why does it do this? Because if you're homeostatically in balance, you have a much better chance to fight off disease, and you will survive. We all have had that experience where we went to the office, everybody else got a cold, everybody else had the flu, but you were taking care of yourself, you were taking your vitamins, you were eating well, and you were working out and getting plenty of sleep. And guess what happened? If you got it, it was a very mild case, or you didn't get it at all. And then we also know the fact that when you go to the office and everybody has the flu or whatever, and you have not been taking care of yourself, what do you say? I just know I'm going to get it. I just know. And you get whammied. Why? Because you are not in an homeostatic balanced state. Your body was out of whack. If you're in that mellow zone, the body can fight it off better. Your immune system is better, and your mood is better, and everything just works at optimum, which helped us survive for all the threats that mankind really should not have survived. I like people who talk about us as being very weak, vulnerable creatures from birth. This skin is not a hard shell. It does not have thorns like a porcupine. It is very vulnerable to injury and to death. And so this is what helped us, is learning the brain, learning how to seek out, okay, it's time of starvation. What can I do to compensate to maybe keep them a little more balanced during these stressors, okay? Now, imagine I'm holding a rubber band just hanging flat like that. And that's my homeostatic state. Everything is chill. And I decide to take an upper chemical and take one side of that rubber band and stretch it all the way over here. For the neuroscientist who taught me this in training, he said it's just like the Roadrunner cartoon when the Wile E. Coyote sends off for the Acme rubber band, and he gets that big rubber band, and he pulls himself back that as soon as the Roadrunner runs past and goes beep beep, he's going to let go. And does he go here? No, of course not. He shoots way out here, ideally, if the rubber band works. Sometimes it doesn't. The rock breaks, hits him. But he shoots way out here, which is what's going to happen as the side effect, after effect of you taking that chemical. So I decided to take an upper chemical. What are the upper chemicals? That's anything that stimulates you. Could be speed, could be methamphetamine, could be cocaine, and definitely now we know marijuana at first speeds you up. If you will listen to your heartbeat after your first hit, it beats 4 times its normal rate. And it also, you get that case of the gigs where you're like, and everything is hyper, colors are better, music is better. That's an elevated state at first before you get stoned, right? And side effect, they're finding out in the states where they've made it legal, there's been a huge uptick in people showing up in the hospital with heart issues. Generally, they don't know. Did they already have an existing problem? Probably. Or is this a side effect of the new pot? We're still figuring it out. We don't have the information yet. But that's happening, is that it's causing you to be stimulated. So I'm going to stretch that rubber band way out here. And you cannot stay here. Your brain is going to wake up and say, oh, I think they took a poison. I need to save them. This goes back to the old days where if you were starving and you were desperate, you might have eaten on a bush that your brain said, I'm not sure that's safe, but I need something, so I'm going to eat on that bush. Or maybe you've watched that show Naked and Afraid when they drink the water and it's not been properly boiled, and they know that, but they'll do it and they get sick and they fall out of the challenge. So your brain told you don't do it, but you did it. The brain still has to wake up and figure out a way to get it out of you before you die. So that's what I'm saying. Your brain's going to release chemicals to kill your high. And I know you paid good money for it, and I know you think that's a raw deal, but it's trying to save your life. Why? Because if it leaves you in this state elevated for too long, you will reach a state of psychosis, which means a break from reality. Even if you've never done meth or coke, if you've seen the show Breaking Bad, and there was one episode I remember where the guy went over and the guy had called him to come over, and he goes to the guy's house and the guy answers the door in overalls, no shirt, and a pitchfork and says, what do you want? And he's trying to stab him. And the guy's like, dude, you called me. That is a break from reality that you don't remember, you don't understand what's happening, and you're paranoid, and sometimes you may come out of it, and sometimes you might not. And I know all my drug friends are sitting out there, oh, what are you trying to do, scare me and say this is your brain on drugs? I'm telling you, this is the reality of it. I work in a mental hospital. Sometimes people come out of psychosis, and sometimes they don't. If you want to have fun, as a little side trip, look up psychosis on Wikipedia, wikipedia.org, the online encyclopedia, and just read that one page about psychosis. It's fascinating. These people are out of touch with reality, and they usually have these grand ideas that they've been chosen by God or by some spirit, that they're the chosen one to share the answer for humanity with the earth. And we had one patient who was like, I have this great idea. We have to share clothing. That's going to save the planet. If we share clothing, you wear it on Tuesdays and then I wear it on Wednesdays. Now, again, it doesn't make any sense at all because I need my clothes on Wednesday. I need them on Thursday. But to him, it made perfect sense and it was going to save the planet. And you cannot talk facts to them. So it's very frightening. So the brain's going to release these chemicals, a big one of which is histamines. You are familiar with antihistamines from cold medicine, right? But histamines are the defenses of the body. So when you get a cold and you get a stuffed nose or you get a little wheezy and stuff, that's your body trying to expel it. It's creating that mucus so you'll cough it up and get the germs out of you, right? And there's nothing I like better than when I get a bad cold or some bronchitis and let's get all that stuff, cough it out, right? It's trying to help you. So, problem is, at some point in your night, you're going to stop using, or the next day, or 2 weeks from now. And you'll run out of dope, or you'll run out of money, or you pass out. Now, the brain doesn't know that right away. So the brain is still releasing chemicals against that rubber band to save you. Now, what's going to happen is it's going to over-release. So you stop using, you let go of the rubber band, just like Wile E. Coyote. Do you go here? No. You shoot over here. So that coming off uppers, you're going to feel depressed. You're going to feel down. You're going to have no motivation. You're going to feel like absolute shit the next day. Period. End of story. Just from the rubber band. You will think it's the drugs. And I did too. I used to think, oh, it's a side effect of using that dope. Some of it, but a majority of it is the brain seeking homeostasis. Okay? So you will fall into that. Now let's talk about downer drugs like alcohol and benzos, things like that. Benzos, for the unfamiliar, is Xanax, Klonopin, Ativan. This would be anything that ends in the word PAM. If you get any script from your doctor and it says lorazepam, oxazepam, all those fancy words they put on it, you don't know what the hell it is, it's a benzo, meaning it's alcohol in a pill. Please hear me on that. There is no difference to your brain between a shot of Jack Daniels and a Xanax bar. Okay? It hits the same receptor in your brain. The difference is the Xanax bar is tweaked in a laboratory to hit that receptor more effectively and for longer. Okay? That's how they were brought about as a class of drugs. We needed a better drug than whiskey to give people when they were shot in the Old West to make them mellow out so it could take the bullet out. So they came up with Valium and then all the other ones. So you're using these drugs and it's taking you down this trek. Now, you won't hit psychosis if you stay here too long. But if the brain does not start releasing chemicals to save you, you will do what I call the Michael Jackson. And I mean no insult to poor Michael, but this is what happened. His doctor put him to sleep permanently. His doctor did not pay attention, left the room, I believe, in the court case is what was established. And Michael slipped away because he stayed in that state for too long. Please understand, if you use alcohol and benzos, you are playing with your life every time you use. Why? When you pass out that night, you did not pass out from the drink you just took. You're passing out from the one that was metabolized 20, 30 minutes ago. However much you drank in the meantime, that's going to hit you while you're flat on the ground, which is why we have these kids dying in fraternities and nobody's helping them and doesn't think they're in trouble. And then the next day the fraternity has to close because they hazed them. And that last drink hits you when you're already out. And by the way, the stages of intoxication for this class of chemicals goes like loose. This is the guy at the bar who starts doing this and he wants to find a partner to dance with when he's had a few jacks. And then it goes to uncontrolled and then unconscious and then coma and death. And there's a very thin line between unconscious and coma. This is what your anesthesiologist gets paid to make sure you don't die during surgery, but also so you don't wake up and feel the pain. They get paid a lot of money to keep you in that tight zone. It's a very thin layer. And I can't tell you how many of my patients have experienced near death and overdoses from playing too hard with opiates and with downers and with other chemicals, mixed usually. Don't ever in your life, if you have any sanity left in you, mix alcohol with Xanax. But I have a patient right now who was doing just that and wrecked 2 cars. Of course you did. Somebody said to me today, somebody topped that and said that they had wrecked a motorcycle, and they asked a rhetorical question, how the hell you pass out, go sleep on a motorcycle? I said, oh, easy for us. We can go sleep anywhere if we're passing out. But your brain doesn't want you to die, it does not want you to fade out, so it's going to release chemicals to pull you back as best it can. Sometimes there's too many and we die. And so here's your rubber band. It's stretched over here. You stop using. You let go. Do you go to center? No. These guys are really interesting. I can peg this in group on the 3rd day. My alcoholic is going to come in with a smile on his face, and he's going to be preaching the Bible to them, not the Bible, but the program, and everything's great. And he's going to make everybody else sick to their stomach. And he's going to be telling me, I don't know why I didn't do this a long time ago. I feel better. I can smell my food. I can taste my food. I smell the fresh air in the morning. I'm not waking up hungover. This is great. And we have to warn them. This is what's called the pink cloud, which we knew about in AA way back to the beginning of AA. But again, science caught up to that. Yes, this is why you're experiencing the pink cloud. Your brain has bounced you over to the upside. It doesn't last. Eventually, what goes up must come down, and eventually you're going to swing back over. Hence, this is the very number one side effect you're going to suffer. I'm going to go over 4, but there's number one you need to know about is mood swings. You're going to be a moody little bitch in your early recovery. 1 second you're up, next second you're down, next second you're angry, next second you're sick, you're crying. And in my group, if you're a therapist professional out there and you're new in the chemical dependency field, don't get too caught up in a patient's mood. I'm telling you, it will change within 5 minutes. My patient might be upset from something that was said in group, and then they go out on break, and now they're laughing, coming back in the door. But then they look at you, and they get sad, and then they get impatient. And it's just like they're going to be moody little, your rubber band's bouncing back and forth is what's happening. So eventually that rubber band will center and go like that. but it's going to take some time. Now, what did I say at the beginning of this podcast? I said your loved ones need to know about this because you are going to have the night where you go to a great meeting. I hope you have that opportunity. Please go to a great meeting. You're going to get high from that, and you won't be able to sleep. You'll come home and want to tell your wife all about it and be like, blah, 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 and she's going to look at you like this. And she may even hug you and go to see if she can sniff any alcohol on you because you're going to be acting like you're high, which you are, but it's a natural high. Plus, it's the rubber band. And so you go to sleep. You wake up in the morning, now you're a bear. Now you're bitching about breakfast and you've got to go to work and you're bitching about your boss. And your wife's going to look at you and see, I knew you were high last night. I knew it, I knew it, I knew it. And you weren't. It was post-acute withdrawals. Again, wikipedia.org, online encyclopedia. I think it's a fantastic resource to quickly read what to expect. And so go on there and look up post-acute withdrawals, and your loved one can read that in 5 or 10 minutes on the toilet. If they love you at all, say, please read this, because I do not want to freak you out. Plus, people get freaked out in early recovery thinking they're doing something wrong. Man, I was in a good mood last night. I had a great meeting. I must have fucked up. Well, I guess I'll go use. And they will go use over something that trivial. It's just a mood. By lunch, you'll feel better. So be patient. You're going to be a little bit of a namby-pamby baby for a while. It's kind of funny in early recovery. Back in the day, they used to call people my babies instead of sponsees. These are my babies because it's like dealing with them. They're going to call you in the middle of the night. And my best story about that, there's a great speaker out there called British John. And he tells this story. He says, and I'm going to try to imitate the accent. Bear with me. It's been a while since I've been doing Monty Python when I was a kid. So I got this sponsee, right? And I tell him, I got a first assignment for you. I want you to go out and buy a pint of ice cream, your favorite flavor, and put it in the freezer. Don't ask me why. Just do it. And so the guy does it, hopefully, if he's a good sponsee. He says, because I know the night's going to come when it's midnight and I need to go to bed and get to work in the morning. They're going to call me and say, I need to talk about my plans. I need to talk about my future. I need to go back to school. I need to marry this girl. I need to do. And it's like, whoa. And they are freaking themselves out over nothing, stuff that isn't even going to come true, but they got to plan it all out and freak it out. And they want to bend your ear about it. So he says, so what I'm going to do at that point, I'm going to say, go to the freezer, eat your ice cream, and call me back. Whole pint. And then if the guy does that, he's hoping he's going to get that sugar rush and go and fall asleep. And he says the day after when he calls him, my new guy's like, thanks, that's what I needed. I didn't need to go over all that crap. It's just me having a meltdown. I needed sleep. You're welcome. Little tricks we learn in recovery. Ice cream can help you a lot in early recovery. Do not worry about gaining weight, folks. You will take it off later. It's just the deal. It's saving your life. All right, second post-acute withdrawal symptom you need to watch out for can be very bedeviling. It's called lack of concentration. If you're having trouble tracking me on this podcast, he's over here, he's over there, that's normal. You don't have permanent brain damage. This is a very common effect. I had a patient one time who went back to work before he left treatment. He just had to. He didn't have any choice. And he said he worked on these huge industrial machines. And he said he'd been doing it for 20 plus years. So he literally could break it down and put it back together in his sleep with his eyes closed. That's what he told us. But he said, I went back to work and I'm sitting there with my toolkit in front of this machine I've repaired hundreds of times, and I don't know which tool to take out first to fix it. And I can't focus. And my brain's going everywhere, racing thoughts, all that jazz. And I didn't know if I was having a heart attack. I didn't know if I'm having a panic attack. I don't know what's happening, but I'm looking over my shoulder, and I'm afraid the boss is going to see me and fire me because I don't know what I'm doing. And I told him, you have lack of concentration, short-term attention span. We'll get to that one next. But that lack of concentration and being able to focus, whew. Remember that movie Up with the dog going, squirrel, squirrel, squirrel? When I had patients in person, prior to the epidemic, prior to the pandemic, and we've stayed with Zoom since. We have this little window in the hospital door, and anytime somebody walked past it, no matter what we're talking about here, I'm going to give you $1 million, pay attention. They're like, they have to look over and see who's walking by the door. They can't help themselves. It's just, I cannot concentrate. So if you're having an experience of reading the big book and you read 5 pages and can't remember anything you read, that's normal. It will get better. It does not mean you have permanent brain damage. Just be patient with yourself. All right, number 3. It sounds complicated, but it's very simple to understand. State-dependent learning. State-dependent learning. What that means is whatever state you were in when you practiced or learned a skill, your brain has now associated that state of mind with the task. So if you were drunk when you became the best pool player you've ever been, when you go to play pool in early recovery, you're going to feel like an amateur and you're going to make a lot of mistakes at first. It's going to feel like your thumbs are tied behind you while you're trying to hit the balls. It doesn't matter what it is, golf, pool, cutting the grass, making love to your wife is going to be a really interesting experience without drugs and alcohol. You're going to feel like you don't know what you're doing, and that's okay. It's normal. Your brain is thinking it has to have alcohol or drugs to perform this better. Now, the best example I was taught about this was the band Aerosmith. Aerosmith had a harrowing 25-year career out on the road where they did every drug and everything a rock star does back in the 60s and 70s. They were road tested, baby. And they all decided to get sober. I don't know if there's any other episode of that where an entire band decided to get sober or had the issue and decided to get sober. And they went into the studio to record their top-selling album to this day in the 80s. And they couldn't play their instruments. And they flipped out. They said, oh my God, we've damaged ourselves. We've lost our skills. We're going to have to quit the band and we're out of business. And luckily they found a nice doctor back in the Beverly Hills who taught them about, no, you just have this thing called post-acute withdrawals. Your brain's thinking you have to be blasted to play at your best. And it's not true. The good news is that the longer you practice in recovery, you're going to be better than ever at any skill that you used to do when you were high or drunk. I can assure you of that. So many of my patients will say, but I drive better when I'm high. Well, the dashboard camera on the cop car might argue that. But any skill was going to get way better in recovery if you're just patient and work at it. And then, like I said, they went on to become more popular and wider liked. I mean, their presence blew up, especially when they did that co-song with Run DMC. Everything, they just blew up because why? They're working at their peak. So if that's appealing for you in recovery, think about that you're going to be operating at a level you never even imagined you could. Just going to have to be patient. So that's state-dependent learning, which again means whatever state you were in when you learned it or practiced it, your brain thinks it has to be in that state to do it at its best. All right, last one, and probably one of the most ones that'll freak you out. It's called short-term memory loss. So what does that mean? It means, what'd you say? What's your name? Literally, you'll be at a meeting, a dude will say, my name's Mike, how you doing? Hey, I'm good. And you can't remember what their name was. They just told you. And you're like, oh. And you'll get up in your head and you'll be like, does he know? Should I say it? Should I ask him? No, don't pretend. Pretend you do know it. But what if you have to say it? And you'll get all flipped out. Instead of just saying, hey, you know what, man? I'm in my second week of recovery and I don't remember what your name was again. Just do that. Just be open. Just be honest about it. I have 2 stories for this that to me were the most impactful, and I've heard a bazillion stories of forgetfulness. Your wife will send you to the store for milk and you don't come home with it, or she'll pin a note to your shirt when you go to work, get milk, and you'll still not come home with it. So that's normal. And again, let your spouse know about this, or when you don't come home with the milk, she's going to accuse you of being high. I warn you. You better let them know about this. You're going to be a forgetful Freddy for sure in your early recovery. So I had a sponsor, a best friend of mine in early recovery. Shout out to Jamie in Minnesota. And he told me this story one time. Well, he used to get drunk and high every night and come home from the bar, and he was a big pool player, was in a pool league. And he would get out of his car, leave it running with the door open, and then come right into his bed and just flop out on his top of his bed with his clothes on. And I was like, didn't he even close the door? He's like, no. And he'd always wake up to his car out of gas in the morning. And I don't know how the cops didn't find it. This trailer park he lived in was pretty well patrolled by the St. Paul police, the troopers, I mean. And so, I don't know. But anyway, he told me the story that one night he came home from a meeting. He's like 3 months sober. Everything seemed to be going well, and marked that time, about 3 months sober. And he went to bed and he thought everything was fine. But he woke up the next morning and he could not find his glasses. And he's looking on his side table where they normally go, and he's looking through his old trailer. He's tearing the place apart. He works at home, but he's tearing it apart to find out where the hell did I put my damn glasses. Eventually, he got so frustrated, he got to the point, well, I'm just going to have to let it go for now because I got to get to work and just do the best I can without my glasses. At least I don't have to drive somewhere. Lunchtime comes. He decides to go in his freezer to get a frozen dinner, and guess where he found his glasses? Sitting right there on top of the ice tray, looking right at him. And he's like, what the hell? Expect to have several moments like that. What the hell? And again, it's going to depend on how long you baked your brain, but this is going to happen. Try to have a sense of humor about it. That's always the best attitude towards all early recovery woes. Laughter is the greatest elixir to whatever we have to go through. You just laugh at it and say, what a goofy thing. I'm getting better every day. It'll get better. But the other story I like so much is from our good friend Keith Lewis. He's one of the best speakers. In my opinion, if you want to look him up on YouTube, do yourself a favor. They'll have him from North Carolina or from Florida, where he retired later, but most of them will be North Carolina. Again, his name is Keith Lewis, Lewis. And he's got this funny voice when he talks, and I always like to imitate it, so bear with me. It makes the story better. He says, so I'm in my early recovery, right? And everything's going good. I'm sober. I'm doing good, man. I'm doing everything my sponsors tell me to do. And I'm driving to work, and I'm on the 5 in California. And, I worked there 17 years, and somehow they didn't fire me. They should have fired me, but somehow they didn't. They let me keep my job. And I'm going to work, and I'm minding my business. I'm going to work. And suddenly I realize I don't remember where I work. And I panicked. He literally did not know where to go. He's on the highway, and he doesn't know where he's supposed to go or where he's going. So he goes, I remember my sponsor. He gave me this card with a quarter taped to it because we didn't have cell phones. And he said, if you have a problem, call me. And I said, well, this is a problem for sure. So he pulled off the side of the road, and he calls his sponsor. 8 o'clock in the morning. His sponsor's already in the office. But his sponsor, being an old-timer, knew that if he's calling this early, something's up. So he answers the phone and goes, hey, Keith, what's up? What's going on? And Keith's like, well, nothing really. I'm not drunk. I swear I'm not drunk. I did not take a drink, but I can't remember where I work. Now, this is why I love the 12-step program. You will not find this almost anywhere else in this world, this level of compassion and sympathy for the newcomer. And newcomers, you ain't going to get much from your family. Please get a sponsor. Get a support group. They're going to love you to health. You're not going to get much from the people you've been hurting. So his sponsor goes, oh, you got the I can't remember where I work problem? A lot of us had that. That's all right. And he's like, wait a minute. I never heard that at a meeting. What is he talking about? And he says, let me ask you, Keith, are you in a phone booth or something? He says, yeah, I'm sitting here in a phone booth. He goes, can you see your car? Yep, my car is right over there. I can see it. Can you see the front bumper, Keith? Yeah, I see the front bumper. He says, do you see that sticker that says Clark Memorial Hospital? That's where you work, buddy. Have a good day. And he hung up. And instantly, it flooded back to his brain what road to take and where he needed to go. And it was solved in 1 minute. And his sponsor didn't laugh at him. His sponsor didn't make fun of him. His sponsor completely accepted him, and he helped him. Where else are you going to get that for free in this world? And I love that story. He went about his way, and rather than getting so panicked and so afraid to call his sponsor because it's stupid, I cannot tell you how many idiots I run into in my group. Dumb newcomers who don't call their sponsor because it's dumb or because they're embarrassed or because they don't want to bother them. I don't want to bother them. I feel like I'm a burden. I was like, oh, my God, you're so selfish. And they'll be like, what do you mean by that? It's like, dude, you're not allowing this man to get the juice. He gets the juice from helping you. You're being selfish. All you're thinking about is you and your reaction. How about you calling him might help your sponsor? Maybe they're having a bad day and they need to help somebody. Well, I never thought about that. Of course you didn't. And his sponsor solved it in a minute. No relapse, no drawn out crap. Boom. Problem solved. You need an old time in your life to navigate your early recovery. So short-term memory loss, you better have some fun with this. You better warn your family. You're going to have some issues. It just happens. It's not a sign that it's permanent. You'll get back to health. But the best phrase I like that somehow came out of my mouth in an inpatient group, and one of my buddies who's still recovered today said it was the only thing he remembered me saying in all those groups he was forced to go to in inpatient. He said, "You told us you done fucked with your brain long enough, now your brain's going to fuck you back." He said, that stuck. And it helped him get by so that he did not freak out when these little things happened, okay? So I'm going to give you one tool to end on that I want you to really focus on, because you're going to have this day that is going to be a flashpoint for whether or not you stay sober or not. You're going to have a day where the night before you did everything perfect. You went to the meeting, you worked with your sponsor on your steps after, you went home and got in bed on time, you brushed your teeth even, and you had a good night's sleep. And then you wake up and the whole world is crashing on you. You are dying. You are flipping out for how dark and down and depressed and hopeless you feel. And everything will just overwhelm you at that moment. What my patients don't consider is maybe that's your body detoxing more. You want to know how this works, folks? We have put so many chemicals into our body that our body has nowhere to put it. It cannot pee it out, puke it out, breathe it out, or sweat it out fast enough. And those are the 4 ways your body has to get rid of this crap that you're putting in there. So it has to store it. And it gets stored everywhere, in your organs, in your fat cells, in your freaking fibers of your skin. And it's still sitting there, and you're still carrying it. And it's going to wait till that day where it's like, all right, I have the resources. I've already dealt with this much recovery. I can handle that one. Let's release that little bit of shit. And so it releases it, and it goes through your system and through your brain, and it processes out. And then you feel like shit. And you don't realize it's just a physical side effect from your using. As I said at the beginning of this, I have yet to meet a patient or a person in recovery early who did not underestimate the damage done. Remember Neil Young's song about the needle? The damage done, bro. Whew. Heavier than you know. If I showed you a scan of your brain and put it on a PET scan, 3-dimensional, and show you the holes in it, when they take those parts of your brain out that are damaged and no longer working, you would be stunned. So when you wake up that way, you want to treat it, as I call it, a detox day, which is very similar to a day that you may have had when you woke up and had the flu. Now you wake up, you feel like crap, you don't want to go into work, but you have to, because you need that paycheck that week. You can't afford to take a day off. So what did you do? If you did it right, you went into work, you did what you had to do, you kept your head down. Don't cause shit with nobody. I'm not going to start fights or get into arguments. I'm going to ignore all that stuff, okay? Keep my head down, get my work done, and I'm going to run home to first Walgreens and get my meds, and then home to my bed, right? That's what you did. Detox day, same philosophy. You put your clothes on, go to work, do what you're supposed to do, suit up, show up. Do not cause shit with anybody. You're going to want to. You're going to feel so horrible you want to start shit with somebody or even fight them physically. Don't. Get through your day, and then you run your ass to a meeting. You won't want to. You'll want to run home and isolate. I know. The Cheetos and the joint's going to be calling you. You run your meeting, sit through the meeting, then go home and go to bed. 9 times out of 10, my sponsee will wake up in a better mood the next day. It will pass. But it's a chemical side effect, and you will put way more weight on it. Maybe I'm not doing it right. Maybe I'm fucking up. Maybe my recovery's broken. I need to just relapse. I've seen this happen 1,000 million times. Stop it. Call your sponsor. Let them know what's going on, and they will guide you through that day. It will pass. And I've seen too many people give up their entire sobriety over a mood. That's who we are, folks. We have a feeling disease. Most important thing in the world is how I feel. And we work ourselves into a lather. We add more fuel to the fire, and then we die. So please don't do that. Post-acute withdrawal is so important to know about. Pass it on to your friends and family. And God bless, if you have a newcomer out there you're working with, please let them know about these things. Have them watch this podcast. You'll make it a lot easier on them. I didn't know about any of this crap. I'll just end on this, man. I thought every day I was dying. I felt like there's an old movie called Night Gallery. Back in the 70s, I saw it when I was 8 years old, and it freaked the shit out of me. Karen Black opens up this box, and it's got an African voodoo doll in it. And the freaking thing comes alive and starts going, and it's got this little knife, and it's trying to kill her. And it chases her around in her entire apartment. And I was just like, ah! I had nightmares about that little dude. That little dude was in my gut in my early recovery, just scraping at it. just that inside. I'm either going to kill myself or I'm going to kill you today, man, because I'm on edge, man. I didn't know. I was just withdrawing. That's it. I really wish somebody could have told me that. I thought maybe it's going to be this way forever, which is the biggest mistake people make. No, it's not. Nobody in the history of mankind would ever stay sober long term if that's how it's going to feel forever. Okay, newcomer? It gets better. And not only that, it gets way better. So just be patient. Be kind to yourself. You're going through a detox. You got the flu, and you'll get better through it. So we'd like to get a little discussion portion on this part of the podcast before we get into our questions and bring our good friend Dan the Man, the producer, in here. I know he went through his own recovery detox with the good old opiate pills, but any thoughts on this topic today, Dan?
Yep, a ton of them, because you do experience all that. My main thing, what I called it, the lack of concentration, was this brain fog. It just set down over top of me, and it felt like I was thinking through a mud puddle. And it was, of course, you had those fears that you'd broke something, that this is, oh no. But thankfully, I had a sponsor to tell me, no, it's normal, and to keep on going. And, I can't tell you how many times I misplaced my damn keys, and you put them in the same place every day, but then you go to grab them and they're not there, and you're spending time looking for them and losing your glasses and various other things that you'd set down and not be able to find again. The one thing though is that, like, after you bust through all that and you hang in there and you work these tools, I used an analogy in an earlier episode about the orchestra wasn't playing in sync, and that's kind of what's going on in this. The orchestra is really a mess in the early recovery phase, and this post-acute withdrawal and that kind of thing. You're just you got a ride that you need to go through. But what the good news is that once that's over, I began to fire on all cylinders for probably very likely the first time in my entire life, because I started using when I was a kid, and held up that show. And man, the sharpness that comes once it comes back is absolutely worth the wait. But it's miserable, and it will drive you crazy. I talk about this disease acting like a parasite on us, and it does not really want us to get better, and it will put you. I'll tell you something else. In that window, everybody, every single guy I've ever sponsored has had some kind of crisis happen. And it was a big deal, almost like like this disease has a life, and it's going to, this parasite actually throws out, and it can be different for everybody on, it runs the gamut on what the crisis is going to be. But it's and then, you take that crisis and you throw this post-acute withdrawal stuff on top of it, man, and you really have to be keeping your ducks in a row to work through it. But again, it's worth it. You hang on, grab a hold of everybody. There's this life raft all the way around you. All you got to do is grab a hold of it, and call people. I can't say it enough, and I like get guys that come back and they go, well, I called Shane and I called Travis and I called Cody today, man, and man, it's been a good day. And I said, well, call guys every day, because it pats down that fire that's raising up in us, wanting us to, get it crowds out the isolation that we all experience when we're going through post-acute withdrawal. We feel very isolated, and staying in touch with your support group is, I think, the single best tool that you got to combat that. They'll tell you that what you're feeling is normal, and take you off of the ledge. There's just to this day, with 9.5 years sobriety, I have a better day when I talk to more people every day. And thankfully, I've got a wonderful support group that contacts me, and I contact, and I'm in touch with probably a minimum of half a dozen people every single day. But use that. Get used to using it. Again, all this stuff is a practice, and you're using your support group in early recovery, you are practicing to use those and use them for the rest of your life. It's not an overnight matter. So this will continue for your lifetime.
As they say in the big book, frequent contact with our sponsor and each other is the bright spot of our lives. And that's what newcomers don't get. They think they're bothering you by calling. So stupid. But I did want to touch on that one aspect you said about, it just went right out of my head. What were you saying just now? Besides the contact with others, you were saying something about particularly one thing.
Boy, I don't know what I say. One moment.
It was really
time.
good, whatever it was.
Well, we talk about it for a second. I'm sure it will come back. But
I'll sidetrack it and distract my mind because that's the best
right.
way to remember something. But the craziest, you see such behavior at the hospital and in the meetings. We had a woman come up to the front desk, and I was just sitting there talking to my boss, and she's like, I need to talk to somebody. I don't know what's happened, but someone has taken my cell phone. I can't see it. I can't find it. I need somebody to find my cell phone, okay? Hold on one second. I'm talking to him. I need you all to find my cell phone. I'm not exaggerating. She was on her cell phone, bitching at us that she couldn't find her cell phone. I was like, oh, Lord.
yeah,
That's almost nearly as bad, but quite not nearly as bad as the person who's doing this and saying, oh, yeah, I didn't use anything. I'm not high. And you're like, dude, look me in the eye. You're freaking can't even sit in your chair. But that denial, that freaking sickness, man, it's so powerful.
I had a moment in early recovery where there was something in the garbage disposal, and I could hear it clicking around down there, and I stuck my damn hand down in the garbage disposal to get it before turning it off. Now, I caught it, but I did feel those little keys down there tap the ends of my fingers, and and I chastise myself. You're supposed to be better than this sober. You're not. But that's the kind of wiring shortcut things that happen when you're going through that withdrawal process. And I knew exactly what that was. That was just it was a dumb move.
And the major thing is when you have a sponsor, they'll guide you not to make horrible decisions that could be life-altering. And I'm going to give you all 2 examples that I'm going to beg you. Do not make decisions in your early recovery. Your brain is broke. You will make horrible, sick decisions that may haunt you the rest of your life. I'll never forget the night that my guy that was in bankruptcy, and he's broke, and he's facing homelessness, and he comes driving in the parking lot in a $40,000 brand new truck. And we're like, and he's like, yeah, well, I went past this dealership, and the guy told me, I can get my credit back in in good grace if I get this loan and I pay it off. And so I thought it was a good idea. I was like, you gotta be kidding me. And luckily, we convinced him. It was his ego fought it, but we said, you're taking that back tomorrow, and we're going to get that straightened out, and we'll go with you. Saved him from being even in worse debt. But the worst one I ever had was the guy that went out on me and did not obey the suggestion to not screw around with anybody in her recovery, and they got AIDS. They got HIV. And the rest of their life, they had to deal with that. And if I asked that person today, was it worth it? They would have gone, no, of course not. That person wasn't worth it. And that's just a one-night stand. I didn't care about that. But that's what your brain's going to do. It's going to screw you. So please run your decisions past somebody you trust. Otherwise, you're going to get hurt in a bad way, possibly.
I still say if I'm going to do anything more important than buying new underwear, I keep my sponsor in the loop. Mm-hmm. I've heard another guy say, when you have a good idea, call your sponsor. If you have it, because it's a week, oh man, I got this great idea. Here's what I will do. Time to call your sponsor.
And I see this all the time in my group. Recently, a guy was like, well, I'm going to go get this job. And so I'm going to miss tomorrow for training, and I'll let you know what I want to do. And then they ended up dropping out of treatment. And I'm like, that's probably not the best decision. But I know that for you and your ego, you're thinking, well, I don't want to live here, and I want to have a better situation. I need money. And they always put money ahead of their life. Every single one will put money ahead of their life. So again, if you have a good sponsor, you call it on sponsor and say, why don't you just sit in treatment and get your head right first before you just jump in a new career?
Yeah,
but you can't stop them.
Too.
You can't stop them.
Yeah, it can be an opportunity of a lifetime, but you're going to go in there and burn it up, and lose another opportunity, which could cause you to easily relapse or, it's that big book says, your guy's going to want to rush headlong into his financial recovery, and nope, spiritual progress comes first. The material stuff will come. It will.
It will. Always does. So I hope that was very helpful. We would love to hear your experiences from your own early recovery and any additional questions I can answer. That was not a full list event by any means of all the things. Those were the top things you're going to experience. And everybody's situation is unique because all of our bodies are unique. So again, you got to be patient and it will get better. All right, for the last part of the podcast, we like to enter into our letters phase where we take questions from you, the listener, and you're completely anonymous in sending in your questions. We will not identify you, so you can ask anything that's, appropriate, and we will address it. We'll try to help you out. So send your questions to IM12, the word recovery, @gmail.com. That's these 4 digits, IM12, recovery, @gmail.com. And we would love to hear from you, okay? Please drop us a line. And how many times do we have it that, Dan, you've told me this, your sponsees will be calling you about shit and saying, well, I wonder what Christopher would say about this. Send it to the podcast. So I'm going to appeal to any of the people we know that are listening. Send us your questions, okay? We would love to hear them. All right, we got 2 questions today. The first one reads as such. Great stuff, fellas. Thank you. A friend who I knew from my time in the madness recently decided to go into detox. And stay this time. Fantastic. He got out and dove straight into the program. About 3 weeks into his recovery, his apartment flooded, and he was forced into needing a new place to stay. My mother rents out her basement and had just evicted a guy. She needed someone to rent. The timing of it all worked out pretty well. I was hesitant to suggest that he rent the basement because of the stories I have heard about opening up your or your family's world up too much, a little too much, to a newcomer. Oh, yeah. So I prayed about it for a few days. Good job. I talked to my sponsor about it. Even better. And I wasn't getting any bad energy off the idea. After all, it would be benefiting for both parties. So my intentions were good, and I got it set up. We got him in there. Everything is smooth, and everybody is happy. But here we are, 3 months in. He is behind on his rent. He has relapsed, and as far as I know, is continuing to use. He has stolen my mother's pills. What do I do? I suggested to him that I suspected he was using, and he denied it. Of course, God denied it. My mom confronted him about her pills, and he deflected and got angry at her for accusing. Best tactic they use, get angry at the accuser. A familiar tactic a lot of us use, indeed. Essentially, I moved a junkie into my mother's basement. That's how I see it. Feeling responsible for it, I feel I should have known better, but I was just trying to help. Anything you could suggest would be extremely helpful. Wow, man. Let's start with this angle on it first, because I have had to console many sponsees through this deal. Do not let the good deed you tried to do get ruined by somebody's bad choices or bad behavior after the fact. I've had more than one sponsee take a guy to a meeting, then get out and go to the liquor store instead, or just not follow through on something when they gave him money. And I'm like, look, dude, you did a good thing. The universe sees that, recognizes that. You should be proud that you tried to help somebody. What they did with your gift is none of your business. That's on their side of the street. Let that go. Don't beat yourself up. You tried to do the right thing. Now, here's where it's tricky for you. It's your mom. I get it. You're hooked. You got to do something. And the first impulse, I'm going to just be honest with you, is I was like, well, I know some guys in recovery that'd be happy to go over there and talk to this guy. And, that sort of group approach, being strength in numbers, might not be a bad idea, because if he's stuck in there like a bed bug, you might need to get him out sooner rather than later, because there are certain laws about trying to evict somebody once they're getting mail and they have that address established as where they're staying. But this is really tricky, man. You've got the disease in your house is what it is. It's not the person. It's the sickness. And the sickness is madness. It doesn't make any sense. It's not going to listen to reason. It's going to violate every boundary or line you set, so there's no use trying to do that. And I hope your mom is doing better efforts to maybe take the pills out of the house and have a friend hold them, or anything else she can do to make sure that she gets what she needs for her medications. I wouldn't spend much time apologizing to your mom because you were trying to do the right thing. I don't think you had any ill will or anything that on your side of the street to clean up. to apologize. But I think we should go into action mode to say, I'm not going to let you suffer through this alone, Mom. I've got a lot of friends. I've got a good program. I've got the tools. We're gonna try to deal with this head on. And so when we say we're going to deal with something, what your fellow recovery guy here does is he refers to the principles. And the first principle I'm hearing is honesty. This guy needs to be confronted directly about what's up. And I would do that in a group effort. And I would just say, hey, man, we're just here to say we know what's up. And this is intolerable. It cannot stand. This is my mother. I'm sure you would not want your mother to have to go through something like this. And we're going to have to fix this. And I'm going to give you some space as a man to figure out what that thing is and work with us and talk to me about it, and I'll help you. But this cannot stand what's currently going on. This is not going to happen. And then you may not get anywhere with that, but at least guess what you've done? You've established the ground rules of war before the war hits. You've told them I'm on to you. You've told them I know what's up. And we've got other witnesses here saying there's some firepower behind what I'm saying. And I don't know, man, when it comes to your mom, if we got to physically evict him, I don't suggest that. But I'm just saying it's okay to feel that way. That you just want to go in there and hit him with a hammer. Because this disease, man, it is just brutal. And it's tough because I try to coach people about what you said to not invite the disease too much into your own house. But then again, I don't want a world where nobody goes to any effort to help an addict or an alcoholic, because that's a horrible place to live in as well. But I don't know of anybody who hasn't been burned in some way or some form from this disease. Even if you're a sponsor, you're going to get burned occasionally by your sponsee because of this illness. It's just brutal. But I'm so sorry you're going through this, because it's unimaginable to think of my own mother having to deal with that in her own home that she's retired in and paid for. My heart goes out to you, and if there's anything more I could do, I'd be more than happy to. But let's bring Dan's opinion into this, because we always think better with that group conscious of getting 2 or more people on the same page with this. What's your take on some of this, Dan?
Well, I believe he went in making a decision with the right stuff. So as you said, there's you're trying to help. It was an honest effort to try to help a guy, an addict who was taking the correct actions and tried to help him on that path. And that's what I believe that's what we're called to do, is to help a fellow get back on track. But when they fall, then what do you do, right? And I'll say one thing, and this just goes out to everybody out there in the world listening. If you have any of those kind of medications that people are seeking, like the Adderalls and ADHD medications, the uppers that people want, the pain relievers, the benzos, if you have any of that kind of medication in your house, you have to keep it locked up today. You have to get like a document safe or something like that. And maybe somebody hauls the whole thing off, but you've done at least they say locks really just keep people honest. But you just have to today, because everybody I know that has those medications, I run into people on a fair regular basis that, their kids' ADHD medication is disappearing. And, you have to do that. You have to lock it up. So that might be a gift for the mom, just as a starter, would be to buy her one of them little document safes and take it over and explain to her that, you just got to keep this stuff locked up, Mom. And then I really like your idea of potentially, basically doing a 12-step call on this guy. I have inside information on this particular deal here. So he does know us, and we know him. And so that familiarity, that we would just come, in the loving spirit that we're just trying to help you. And the flip side of that is what you're doing is just not going to fly. You have to, if you're going to do, I'm not going to help you stay sick, and I'm sure as hell not going to help you stay sick in my buddy's mom's house or my mom's house or whoever happens to be talking. I used that analogy the other day about like, let's say this disease is like fire, and it thrives on oxygen. The only thing we can do is take its oxygen away. We can remove the things that is feeding the disease, and that's really the only power we have is at any level, is just to remove that the food that fuels the disease. It is a tough spot though, and I feel for him big time. I hate that it's happening, but I do like that approach of basically a 12-step call. A number of men in 12-step go over and support our brother and let the guy know what the stakes are, where the stakes are right now. Here's the line.
And for anybody else that's listening about the safe idea, I know what you're going to think because I've seen this 100 million times. Oh, well, I'm good. I can hide it. No, you can't.
Nope.
I like what my friend Dan says about it. He says, I could smell them in your house.
Smell them.
I know where to find them. And you're going to do something dumb like put them in the sock drawer, which is the first place they're going to look. So please don't rely on your skills to try and outsmart an addict. You cannot outsmart this disease.
Those safes are under $100, you know, some of them $50, $60 for those a decent document safe, and you can throw your birth certificate and your passport and that kind of stuff in there too.
But I would almost recommend, from what I heard in group today, maybe a combination lock deal, because what happened was my guy in group today was like, man, I just learned how to lockpick. I went to YouTube. You can learn some amazing things on YouTube. And the other guy was telling, well, I just used a screwdriver and broke the lock. I didn't care.
Yeah, the people will still, but it'll be it's a first level deterrent.
It's a warning. It's a warning saying, when you're doing this, I'm on to you. I'm watching you. And I wouldn't put them all in there. I still like the idea of giving some to a friend so you have a backup supply. And if you can trust them, but we all know one friend that's stable. And we can hold our stuff.
And all those safes nowadays come with, they got some kind of digital timer, punch button, 5, 6 number combination locks on them. I have two of those type in my house. And then I've got a big gun safe that's got the old fashioned dial it. And there's no way somebody no regular person would figure out how to. No, they couldn't get into that one. But those document safes really are, and I'm gonna speak from some experience here. As a guy who did that, who broke into houses and stole stuff, those little document safes are pretty solid. They're heavy. You don't really even want to carry them off. It's not like I know sometimes you get these little lock boxes that you just pick up and take to another location and stick a screwdriver in and pop them open. That's why I said I think I'd rather see you get something in that like fire rated document safe. Those things are tough. They're hard to get into.
That's an excellent idea. And again, the second principle would be that strength in numbers. We don't do anything alone in recovery, and we particularly don't go on 12-step calls alone.
Absolutely.
And I like Dan's idea that we're going to go there in the spirit that, you know what, we're trying to help. And then when you don't want to help, it'd be like Patrick Swayze in Roadhouse. You're going to be nice until it's time not to be nice. And at that point, I do think we need to double down and not let this linger. This is a bed bug that's infested, and I don't play with bed bugs. I take major action immediately, and we're getting rid of that son of a bitch.
Yeah, and there are some big rules around being able to evict somebody, and I hadn't even thought about that at the moment. It may be time to begin that process.
You have to at least file the documents 6 months ahead of time, I think. So he might be there for 6 more months, but hopefully we can scare him off or something. Or he might see reason and be willing to go to treatment.
Yeah.
But the main thing Dan and I are saying to you is don't do it alone. You're carrying this burden maybe a little too heavy because you feel like you're the son that fucked up. I don't see that. And I don't think Dan sees that at all. You try to do a good thing, and the guy took advantage, and his disease took advantage ultimately. So God bless you for trying to help somebody. But thank you for the question, and if we can help at all anymore, let us know or send us an update on how this all turned out. I would really like to hear. And be talking about it at meetings maybe. Maybe as a burning desire, bring that stuff up. I know it's hard, and you think it's my personal business or I feel like I screwed up, but man, that's the stuff that helps newcomers to know that we're human, and no matter how long you're recovered, we're still going to make mistakes and things are going to happen. That's life.
Yeah.
So
especially bring it into our meeting.
Yeah, especially you'll get great support. All right, second question, a little switch up today. Mr. Dan the man himself had a take on a question that he's been pondering on. So, Dan, I give you the podium. Let's have it. What do you got?
All right. Well, for those uninitiated in 12-step recovery, we do what is called a 4-step inventory on our lives. And part of that, Bill Wilson was so forward thinking that in the 1930s, he knew a piece of that had to do with your sexual inventory and what you had done how you'd behaved around sex, and so we do that. And we've got I always talk to people, and I beat it. We have a recipe I thank Christopher Cohn for bringing the recipe to me of a whole bunch of years of basically cherry picking the best ways and the most effective methods of getting this work under your belt and getting as free as you can possibly get, and one, through the first trip. We're going to do it again too, so that's where I'm going. In the first recipe, or the recipe for the beginning one, we break apart our sex lives into years. And I know it sounds a little crazy, but if you're just now hearing this, but like from 0 to 5 years old, and from 5 to 10, and you look at the things that impacted you as to who you are as a sexual being today, whether if it's walking in on mom and dad, or if it's finding those first porn magazines, or the first kiss, or whatever the different things, and some of them can kind of ramp up quite a bit from there. And I think that's a super good way to do a first sex inventory. I think it's an optimum way to do it. But then when you take guys through the work later, I'm not sure that that's the most helpful way to approach the sex inventory when a guy's established in recovery and he is going through one of these subsequent trips through the steps. So actually, that's a question of mine that I was going to ask you, and you've helped me with that in the past. And I know that we look at some things about, like, whether if you're, maybe inventorying like around your current sex life, and whether if your needs are being met, and those kind of things. And so my question today is asking for a brush up on you on valuable, worthwhile ways to do subsequent sex inventories when a guy's firmly rooted in recovery.
Hell yeah. Such an amazing, wonderful question, because I'm not a fan of doing the same thing over and over. And I think that's a very boring way to do the steps. And the book and the 12 steps, the very big book, is very flexible. It's very wide. It doesn't say, well, this is the only way to do it. And Bill didn't advocate for that. So all these guys are saying everything you need to know is in the first 164 pages. You did not read what Bill Wilson wrote, because he said we have many doctors and practitioners of all varieties and all this other stuff that we should take advantage of, and Bill did in his own life. So we should follow the example of the founder of what started this whole thing. But that fundamentalist shit, it doesn't work. And then people do the steps the same way over and over, and they don't get anything out of it, and they relapse. They get bored with their recovery. So what Dan is talking about, just to give you a heads up, I'm finishing a book called I Am 1-2 is what it's going to be called. And it's going to be the 12 steps for everyone, but it's going to include this recipe of doing the steps on this deeper level. And I've been around, man. I've sat at the feet of some of the greatest teachers in this program, and I have been able to put together these things that I've seen through experience and helping all the men that I've sponsored. It just works the best, and they get the highest result. And so that will be available to you later on this fall, maybe near Christmas, but we'll see how the higher power works that out. It's going pretty well in the editing phase right now. It's basically done. I'm just cleaning it up. And we'll have this step-by-step stuff. But like, for instance, this today in group, somebody was saying their sponsor has them in the 4-step, and it's kind of hard. And I was like, well, are you doing the list format? Because that's not hard. And he's like, well, what do you mean? I was like, dude, your first list is just everybody and everything that gets on your damn nerves. You can put that out in 15 freaking seconds. You're talking about it all the time in group. And he's like, what? And I said, well, you're working across the page. That's very hard. But again, specifics like that are not in the big book. This is what we've learned through hardcore experience, people doing it. So on the sex inventory, this idea came up of that we are not the best judge of our character defects. And we will usually, as alcoholics and addicts, specifically let ourselves off the hook, folks. We are conniving felons. And if you give me an angle to cut on something, I'm going to take that angle because I'm embarrassed. I don't want my sponsor to know about it, or I don't want to talk about it, or I don't want to look at it. So I will give myself that little cut and say, it's okay, I don't need to talk about this one thing. And so some people, interpret the sex inventory that I'm just supposed to write down the bad things I did. And I think you don't learn anything from that. I think if you start from your birth to where you are today, and you write down everything and anything that had to do with sex that crossed the threshold of your life, you're going to see a through line of how you turned into the person you were when you were sick. And it won't be this thing like, oh my God, I'm such a pervert, I'm such a monster. No, it'll make total sense for why you ended up over here. One of the stories I heard from one of my teachers on this was that a woman had this fetish for rubber. And that was the only thing that could get her off. And she didn't know where that came from, and she felt like a freak, and she felt shameful, and she couldn't share it with her sponsor, but she eventually did. And it come to find out there was a buried memory that when she was a child, her grandparents used to punish her by throwing her in a closet and locking it. Horrible child abuse shit, right? And while she's in there, she's got nothing to do, and it's completely dark, and she's afraid. And she found this boot that she would hug close, almost like a teddy bear, just to get some consolation that she's been deserted and she's frightened. Can you imagine? And while she's in there, she figured out that if she rubs it a certain way in there, it gave her a little bit of pleasure, which is what all children do. That's normal childhood sexual development, to understand that you have that capability, and hence the origins of her fetish, which made it more acceptable to her to understand that it wasn't a freaky, crazy ass. And people die. I've seen people kill themselves over their shame, over sex issues. So this ain't no joke, folks. I've got to see what happened to my little kid that was innocent, and then I got a little twisted along the way. I didn't become a freak overnight. So that's why we do it that way. Now, to answer your question specifically, I like the approach of... one thing you said that a lot of people don't think about is what needs do you have that you're maybe afraid to speak to your partner about, or are not being met for you right now? Because I think that's a big problem for people becoming resentful, unsatisfied, and or getting divorced in recovery, that they can't communicate. I have these interests. I have these exciting things I'm interested in trying. Maybe their partner might be too, and they're just waiting for the other person to speak up first. But not being able to have that dialogue and get honest. We try not to keep secrets in the program. And again, you're not going to broadcast this to your home group, but you're going to talk to your sponsor about this, who is the safe person you have in your life. And then there's this idea of what other things are still hanging on for you from the past, and or you might still be doing today and not talking to me about, that you still feel guilt and shame over, and we haven't been able to fully let them go. What things still kind of bug you a little bit about your past freaky life as an addict alcoholic, because we all got our freak on when we were out there doing drugs. And then how does that fit into your life today, where maybe there's some of those things that could be practiced in a healthy way that you're looking at as completely objectionable, and things you're so ashamed you don't even admit you want to do. But then there is that little part of you that's like, I don't know, I've got a little bit of interest in understanding that about myself. And this is a weird hang up in Western society. Europeans, other parts of the world, not necessarily maybe the Asians, but they have a little bit more open attitude about, as long as you're not hurting anybody, your sex life is your business. In America, we make it everybody's business by putting a celebrity in the news when their sex tape is released or some bullshit, right? But if you talk to any sex therapist that I've encountered, they're going to talk about the unhealthy is not always unhealthy, and it depends on how you're doing it and who you're doing it with and whether both parties are satisfied. And, there's room for negotiation. So again, I would drill down like you're centering on where you're at today, what still bothers you, what are you still carrying from the past, but what are you also not talking about in your sex life with your spouse? What are you unsatisfied with? And, is it even working for you? This is another thing the sex therapist will talk about, is that over time, sex becomes boring. It becomes route. You get the kids in bed, you get dinner made, their bed chores are done, dishes are in the sink, and then it's like, oh, we're just going to do this one little act and go to bed. Boring. And it may very, very well sow the seeds of you all breaking up. This is a huge issue in breakups, is unsatisfied sex life. And remember, we have sex until we die, if we're capable. This is a normal part of who we are. There's nothing wrong with it. It's only the damn church that turned it into a weapon, and I hate them for it. Haven't quite gotten over that resentment. So, I think that's a great approach, just to switch it up. Did you get any ideas off that clicked with you?
Yeah, well, the one thing is I did not think about drilling into like what's left over, what's hanging around that you didn't maybe, because we all know when we look at ourselves and we sit down and do this honest appraisal, that stuff is sitting there.
Yeah, it is.
And to drill back in and maybe give a little look at what maybe is been hanging since you did the steps last time around. But I really like looking at these, like you said, these unmet needs, these things that are going on, and maybe, that way with your sponsor you could develop a plan to maybe open those conversations, because frankly, your relationship ain't going to be worth a shit if your sexual needs are not being met. Mm-hmm. It's going to fail. It's a vital piece of a healthy relationship, and like you said, most people, I think, if you truly love one another, you at least will listen to them without judgment about what they might want. Maybe you don't want to do that and you're not interested in it, but you'll listen to it with compassion and understanding. And who knows, maybe you both have been hiding some pretty adventurous sexual ideas from one another, and that can break the ice on it, and we can say, hell yeah, let's get one of them swings or whatever it happens to be.
Well, that's the other mistake we make in our society is we just do it, we don't talk about it.
Yeah.
So there's
Are
no
you
communication.
okay with this? Yeah.
Right.
What do you think about this?
Or we just do it by numbers, and we don't share, or we don't really talk about what we like. I think it's the most difficult part of relationships long term, period.
It is.
How do I make my freak match up with your freak? And that we're both happy, you know?
Right. Yep. And keep it fresh. Like I said, if because that is like and most of the time, and I have some other definitions for intimacy because I know that you can be intimate without having sex too. Mm-hmm. So I get that, but it is one of the probably, I guess it's the most intimate thing you can do with another person, and it does bring you closer. And that's I listened to a girl the other day. I listen to lots of stuff, and she put it in a way. She said, you want to talk about intimacy from a female standpoint, I'm actually allowing you inside of me. And I just really, the way she said it hammered me. So yeah, it was, again, just what a blessing that Bill was open enough back then to make that a part of our now almost 90-year-old process, that we have a way to look at this stuff and process it and present it to our partners and deal with it. Because otherwise, it's like I said, we're only sick as our secrets. And I promise you, if your sexual needs are not being met, what you will do is you will meet them, whether if it's through action on the computer or the girl at the office or whatever. You're going to go looking around for to fulfill that piece that you're missing. Mm-hmm.
And the remarkable thing is that Bill was able to present it for anybody that's not familiar with this in such a level way. Mm-hmm. He said, we're all human. We all have sex problems. We'd hardly be human if we didn't. And we got to avoid hysteria, because there's people out there that are going to say, oh, no, you can only do this, you only do that. I just laugh at that stuff with the church and all that stuff that has weaponized sex like that to make me feel bad about myself for using my God-given gift in a way that you don't like, but you're doing freaky stuff that we don't know about in your own closet, skeletons in the closet, which always come out. The ones that are most judgmental are doing the freakiest, craziest things they get arrested for.
Yeah. We are not
so avoid that. Avoid hysteria or anybody that's like, just extreme about it.
Yeah. We're not the arbiters of your sex life.
That's a good one too. It's not up to anybody else to decide what is right for you.
So, cool. Thank you. That does
You're
help.
welcome. Again, it's just little techniques and tips and tricks. I get a lot of guys that call me and say, well, I'm taking this guy through the steps again. What do I do? I'm like, well, don't do the exact same thing, man. Well, let's read the big book and go through. Oh, God, you've already done that. Not that you can't read the big book again, but you need to just make it more, what are we going to do different to reach a deeper level of spirituality? That's the ultimate goal, is you're trying to go deeper in your recovery. That's what we're seeking by doing the work again. So thank you for that question. I thought it was really on point. And if that's intriguing to you guys, again, hang in there for that book coming this fall. We want to try and help as many people and spread this word that these steps were made for everybody. The world doesn't know that yet. I think it's our only salvation. I'm going to tell you straight. I may be a little bit of a freak about this, but you name me one other thing that changes people as drastically and dramatically for the good that this thing does in such a short time. You're talking about a gutter drunk who's cursing at strangers, and he becomes a guy living in a multi-million-dollar house with a good job and a good family and a great member of the program, helping others, going down and feeding the poor and doing all that other shit. Doesn't happen. Rarely happens. And other people are suffering. The normal people out there are suffering just as much as addicts and alcoholics. They just have resources to hide it. If you've got a job and money, you can hide it behind closed doors, what you're suffering from. So join us, as our good friend Travis says. You might get to see Travis real soon here, so stay tuned to the podcast. But join us. We would love to have you on the journey of recovery. All righty, we'll wrap up this episode. We don't like to hit you on the head with this, but again, please like, subscribe, leave a comment. That helps us get this message out to more people. anything you can do to help us in that department, please feel free to help us with that. All right, we'd like to close with the serenity prayer at the end of the group. So, Dan, if you'd like to join me on the prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Just for today. Keep coming back. It works if you work it, and you die if you don't. Thanks for being with us, folks. We love you. Peace out.